Oh, gracious, good morning. If you hear all kinds of noises and stuff in the background, you know how weekends are and how early Mondays are, etc. So this is a recap for Platinum on our third decision. We have weeks 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 for the 5 decisions. We've just done 3, 4, and 5 are moving in. So we've got decision 1, 2, and 3. Now we're moving into decision 4. Uh, which is the last one of the last two, 4 and 5. 5 is very different. 4 is crucial. Everyone did great this time. Welcome my chat and my previous validators. Uh, we will, without further ado, jump into this, but I want to let you know that everything is ready to go. As you watch this, the CLCs have been provisioned and configured. You can jump into the decision CLC. This time you do get points for your places and for your hard work. And just by a general summary, we can look at EBITDA and see what happened this time in the rankings. But essentially, blue has created a flywheel and did great again. Red lost a little and gained a little. And yellow crashed and burned in image because their price was set way, way, way too high. And we'll see that the price elasticity of demand is very, very elastic, which means the slightest little change and boom, demand drops to nothing. So we did some calculation, posted on Halo, and you can see how those calculations work. But without further ado, let me share I keep saying that, don't I? Share my screen. And what we're saying here is that the last decision, blue kept a decisive lead, red slipped a little, and then yellow crashed and burned in image especially. And we'll look at that in a second. I have to remind you, our final paper is coming up, and you need to save these visuals. We're not supposed to, we're supposed to take the training wheels off for the last two decisions, but I'm still going to give you plenty of graphics to use in your final paper. These are just some of the variables for price elasticity of demand. You can see this in announcements on Halo. Remember, announcements are the place to go for a lot of stuff that regards your final grade, final paper, etc. I put them all in announcement. I try to duplicate them in the discussion questions, but this is always the primary place for them. And you can respond to them in the discussion because I duplicate it there if you want some participation credit for reading it and understanding. So this is basically the this is yellow versus red and blue. This is red and blue. Red and blue, when you look at how close they are in the elasticity, it's 1.25, which is not that elastic, you know, because they're very close in terms of supply and demand, and price is very close. Look at their price, 129.30. $1 is not going to make that much difference. But when you have 150 versus 129, that spread, the elasticity gets nailed because it's negative 6.53. Negative just means that, as you know, it's a downward sloping demand curve. So the higher the price, the lower demand, and you know it's an inverse relationship, and vice versa. So the negative is a single symbol of that. But again, that's extremely elastic, which means no orders, a huge amount of great spending, but a price signal that it's so high. Now, if everyone else said, "Oh, yellow is brilliant," and they're suggesting that we uh, we all raise our price a lot more and make a lot more profit here, our leader blue didn't get the message, nor did red. So either they didn't get the message or he said, "No, forget it. We're going to stay neck and neck down here." Because if one more takes a chance and the other one doesn't, it's like we all hang loose together or all hang separately. Because if one stays an outlier and keeps it low, they're going to take over the market even more. Although red also had other issues we'll see on LOI with CapEx, with cash, etc. Because of yellow's crash, they had another government loan here, and you'll see that in these financials. We pull up the results. First of all, for the ranking, of course, you know, it shows similar to last time. Blue's doing a great job, just taking on the bacon. Red's doing great. And yellow had major problems, as we'll see in image, with that price. But these are the actual standings, which determine, and you'll see that yellow now has jumped to number 2 in employee morale and in sales revenue and emissions. So yellow did actually a lot better. So the one problem in image belies the fact that they're doing a lot better. You'll see blue slipped in emissions, but are almost number one in everything else. So they really have created a machine here for EBIT. Nobody's in positive ARE yet, but no one hardly ever does in these sims because it's a turnaround and it's hard to get actual retained earnings, which mean what? Capital access. Where do we got our capital? We have no ARE. Loans, bonds, convertible debentures, stock sales, etc. If we're not generating enough internally, we have to then eat some interest rates. And I'm giving you a bunch of math on the interest rates, but essentially the things that you have to do to back into those interest rates um, are the formulas for uh, R times T, R, big R, and I. I is the effective periodic interest rate, which is R, which is your nominal rate or your APR, divided by M. M is also the number of compounding periods. If it's a bond, it's usually semi-annual, so that's M would be 2. M is usually annual, so it's just M is, you don't have to divide R to get your interest rate. R is R, it's your nominal. Of course, if it's a bond or any other thing, you might also be paying interest that like a coupon versus what the actual interest rate is if it's variable, or you may have a fixed instrument depending on what kind of, debt that you get into. The government loan is obviously lower interest, but in the sim, it's about 8% for either of the loans, the ones you go to the market with your debentures or your bonds and the ones you get from the government. And then you just evaluate any, like you would any other instrument. Fixed instrument would be an annuity plus your cash out or what you owe at the end, depending on whether you're a buyer or seller. And, annuities are just, the present value, which is, 1 minus 1 over 1 plus the interest rate. Um, raised up to n, which is a total number of periods, and you take it to you take those to the number of payments when you're doing like a present value or a future value. That's, with the little n is up there when you're doing those formulas. So again, everyone's doing great. Yellow had that major problem image, which we'll take a look at, but let's take a look at our favorite, which is EBIT. Here we have the picture. Yellow almost doubled or tripled the problem in image, but they did fantastic in did fantastic in family and did well in low cost. And eco, not too bad. There's a couple things they have to look at more carefully in terms of inventory with eco, and most by this third, fourth, and fifth start to do a little better in eco and start to possibly do a little better in low cost because they're growing now. And when you looked at the landing page, did you notice the landing page for decision four? It was $1 and then almost $2 for decision two, decision three. What is decision four? Aha, that's an important thing to remember, is it not? Let's look at, before we come back, well, let's look at this first. We'll talk more about yellow, but the key thing that has driven all this is in terms of yellow's problems. You can see that they're actually beating red in revenue, which is why you saw revenue, them grabbing second place there. They are driving a lot of demand, but the ability to supply that demand and the cash because of CapEx, this is the second or the third time they've needed a government loan when you see that 18, 19,000. And you look at the leverage, which is leverage, 67% compared to 27 for blue and 33 for red, which aren't too bad. It's great. So you can see that's definitely a problem. Let's jump to image here. And you can see the price problem here, 29, 30, and 50. We just looked earlier at price elasticity of demand, and that's going to drop your demand way, 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 way down, as you can see. Blue is doing fantastic. Red's doing good, but this is where we got a little killed in yellow. What's happening with yellow, there's some really good decisions being made, but they're a little bit erratic. The pattern recognition for yellow, from the instructor standpoint, is it doesn't look like a fully functional team. It looks like there might be members. Now, if you have a team of 4 or 5 and you got one person that's, and we'll see this on the peer reviews, that are not participating, that's a guaranteed not pass the class kind of thing if you're not participating in the sim. It really is. You need to take it again. But everybody else is doing fantastic. Yellow, unfortunately, looks like there's one or two people carrying the whole thing, making all the decisions. I'm not saying I know that yet, and I'm not going to repeat peer reviews or any of that other stuff, but we do grade on that, on the peer reviews strongly in terms of participation and what we're hearing if someone has bailed out or is not there. Obviously, if you're overseas, you get a pass to an extent, but you can also contribute a lot, even if time zones are causing some issues, which we do take into account. So that's part of the problem with yellow. But we have showed that elasticity in videos and tons of posts. The last couple of decisions I've really mentioned, be careful about not signaling too high of a price if it doesn't look like you're in a place where the competitors are going to jump. And in your decisions and all your posts and what that you can say, image could stand an extra $5 and we could all make a little more. I mean, we're not allowed to call and do antitrust, but we can definitely send signals like this. In this case, when you have two that are competing very closely for first place. Now, can yellow end up first? Absolutely, because the inventory situation, they're already doing good on number one, number two on two indicators. So all they have to do is fix the image, get this price in line, um, make sure their inventory goes, and we'll show you how to do that by decision 5. There's a way to balance your inventory out. You have to watch the video before decision 5 with Paul Water and myself. That is a most important video before 5. Before 4, do what you've been doing. Don't do too big of corrections. You're doing a great job, but we'll look at, and the most important thing is I'm sending you those lines, those white lines. You need to save those every period. You also need, for your final paper, to save Annex 1. Now, there's no annexes after the third decision. There's not a fourth and fifth annex once you put the 3 in. The box is mainly there to chat with and then to do your decision here in Harvard. But very, very importantly, um, send me, put it in your paper, make it an exhibit, all of your slider decisions for all 5, because that's what drove the white line, and that's what you have to look at in your paper, saying, here's the decision we made, here's where we made course corrections, here's where we ended up and why. That's all you need. It doesn't have to, you don't have to say, oh, we consistently got number 1, although you will get obviously more points for that. You can still get an A in this class, as I've always said, if you really explain what happened clearly with the metrics, and that's important to keep that white line. So without further ado, we're already in image, and on this, we've looked at these. We'll be giving you all these, so I will give you a quick way to sort of take a screenshot or whatever you need to do on these other financials, paying close attention to what happened with yellow and blue as something that is a good way to work compared to not as good a way to work, although low cost does not look as bad as it had in others. Family is going to be fading for the last decisions. Remembering that appeal, we're trying to get around 100. So we have a huge amount of marketing appeal. And I'm not saying yellow did terrible in family, but what I'm saying is that hit 100 and it's easier not to have cash problems with CapEx because you're doing way too much marketing for the inventory you have to deliver, and you're going to get fantastic demand. But in those orders, what's going to happen in terms of how many you can actually fulfill. If you're at 100 or below, you have some room. But when you look at your capacity, the capacity used is really important because it's like, do I have enough capacity or not enough capacity? Am I at full capacity, or do I need to back off in terms of what I put in there? And how many units did I produce compared to the inventory? And is it positive or negative at the end of the day? So if you look at where is the next demand going to happen compared to current, you can see the LOI in numbers, lost orders over inventory, as huge here in family for yellow, whereas blue is actually positive and red isn't too terribly bad. So you'll see those lines in LOI, how they exactly match these numbers. This one, of course, specifically for family. And then eco, we already looked at image. Eco is now coming into its own. People are engineering it by having a lot of consumption sliders going, which they know is good. But again, look at blue down here. Again, similar numbers in terms of plant capacity. What is happening with the percent used, and we're at 65% the same thing with yellow, and yet we're engineering way above 100%. When you're at 100 like this with engineering, and even though effective is a little higher, you're doing just fantastic. But if you're spending money on engineering, not quite on marketing, Blue could still do better. Um, in eco by taking a look at what they're doing with marketing compared to the capex they're getting from a great hit on engineering and engineering appeal. So that's also reflected in in our revenues, and of course we just looked at EBIT across the board, where yellow got squashed, not as bad as an image, but also here in eco. So these again are things for you to look at, take pictures of, use in your final paper, and in your decisions. Uh, without further ado, let's look. Without further ado, I keep saying that, darn. What else? Tell myself what I can say that. And on the other hand, let's go to our white lines. All right, we'll start with red here, but before we jump in, look at this. Gas price, GPI, 2.3. Business index, not bad. Production cost, PCI, good. Uh-oh, uh-oh. Image, be very careful because gas prices are going way up, way up. It's not a recession. We don't do that in this sim. We do on the ground schools, but not here. So be very careful of the GPI as you do your image decisions for 4 and 5. Now, with further ado, let's go. What is going on in low cost, which didn't do terribly bad for anybody, but there were some mismatches. There's a mismatch. Okay, wherever you have big gaps, there's a mismatch. There's a little bit of a mismatch, and here's a little bit of a mismatch. So, um, red did good, but they didn't knock the cover off the ball with these a few mismatches. And when they're matching, you can just look at obviously consumption and a couple of the others that are dead on, and then what are the actual sliders. So you can really take a look at each one of these, take a shot, save them. They're important for your three. We'll need annexes for the last, they don't have to be dropped in the box, but you have to do them just so you see what happened and you explained it in your paper. What did I do on the sliders that resulted in massive matches or mismatches? This family's a tough one to do well in because it's easy to overspend in it, especially in marketing, where the car dealership proximity is something that's very important here. Although that's not too bad. They had some good dealers here. Um, and purchasing insurance in dealerships is somewhat important, but you can see that the last two in terms of brand power and after sales were a little bit over, but not too bad. Not bad. Everyone's actually doing fairly good in family. Eco was also a problem. It kills people in the first 2, 3 decisions, but now for 3 and 4, it starts to come into its own, starts to grow. People figuring out what happens. Uh, they know that size can be very important in eco, and we have a little bit of mismatch with the market compared to what we're adding here in size. Technology is not as important as some think, although it's very important image, it's less important here. So there's a little adjustment can be made there. And of course, number of models is always an issue, especially in image and family. But consumption, which is, the key, is always terribly overspent because it's like we want really good mileage. No, better, better, better. But this was really a good job I read. They hit consumption. Remember that in eco, it's really important. And then image, of course, is always either we live or die by it. And you can see I mentioned number of models being important. Um, I've gotten many texts about this, and number of models is important, but it's expensive in CapEx and cash. But in you cannot back off of number of models in image, and you'll see that um, when we look at blue. This is a huge, huge, huge gap, and this is the main problem. But there are other problems where we've got problems with comfort, and we got problems with consumption. Again, making something extremely gas efficient in a race car isn't matching the customer's needs. They don't really need good mileage. It's good for the planet, but that's not what the value proposition is for image. All right, let's jump to blue. All right, I started with number of models here just in image instead of starting at low cost, which is a little disconnect. But I wanted you to had fresh in your mind how there's this gigantic gap, and then there was a huge EBIT problem for red in image. And look at image here, where blue continues to nail that key number of models. When you look at, let me get this to work with tech, not bad. This is a little bit, they don't, again, consumption, giving a lot of um, miles per gallon for image is not as necessary as you see. This is a bigger gap for robustness, and image has a lot of, image does have a lot of field failure rates with heavy engineering, and blue is not wrong to look at it this way, but just not quite as much. Again, performance you think is really key uh, for image because some of them are race cars, but some of them are just looking good and they don't have the performance. So this is not bad, but splitting the difference would help. And then finally we have novelty, which novelty is very, very important in image. And this surprised me a little because blue's done fantastic in image, but there's a hint at something you can look at is your novelty. Now let's go back. Just give a quick snapshot of low cost, family. Wow. Wow. What a fit. Congratulations, Blue. Eco. Oh, well, this is problematic, isn't it? They want a lot more robustness than we're willing to give them. They want a little more comfort and just a tiny bit more performance. Is that all? Is that all surprising in eco? It is hard to get eco right, is it not? It is. Eco has some very strange wants and needs. All right, let's go. Let's get up to our dearest fellow friends in yellow. Family, one big problem, which we saw with red and image, number of models. We put a lot more models than are needed. If this was image, they'd love it, but not in family. Eco, some mismatches. They didn't do terrible, but there was a lot of overspending compared to what was needed. Again, eco is very hard to figure out. The general shapes of the curve are close, which is good. Great trends. It's just, again, it's similar to last time. It's like 3, 2, 1, robustness and then comfort. And then this is where performance is almost dead on. Good job. And finally, here's our albatross this time, which is a huge, 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 huge amount of spending on number of models, which is just the opposite, just like the LOI curve of what happened with red in image, right? And yet there are probably more gaps here of what the market needs. Spend a huge amount of money on something they don't need as much, and then uh, way too little. Um, it's true that we shouldn't be way up here on consumption, but You can't be so far down on consumption. Wow, look at that. 3. We can't say you get no mileage at all in image. It would help to get a little closer, but it's called the bullet whip effect, where we see a fairly steady curve, but we go way above, then way below, then way above, then way below. That happens a lot with inventory also, especially with dealerships who have safety stocks. They order a bunch of stuff they can't sell just in case there's going to be a shortage, and then that creates the shortage. So you can see some of these are self-fulfilling. Here's the story where we are trying to balance off and get towards zero. Here's our zero line. Obviously, you can see in low cost, we've had a lot of sine curves going on. Too high, too low, just right. Blue has done fairly well up until now in low cost, but you can see them building inventory. So there's an issue with low cost sales. Same thing with yellow, has a huge amount of inventory build, which we saw in the financials. And red, on the other hand, is getting a lot of orders, but having losing them because they are not producing what they're selling. They put a lot into marketing and low cost, but they are not. Their production is way down. It's almost like they're not. They don't want to do this line. If you don't want to do this line, you still got to cover depreciation, and you shouldn't be spending that much on marketing then if you're not going to feature a line. Not that everybody isn't doing okay there, but what we're looking for is, again, blue is not bad here, but they are building some inventory in family. They're really focusing on image. They did okay in family. Look at yellow here. Yellow really did a great job, this decision of selling off that inventory, especially in family. They did good in family, could even be doing better. But remember, the zero line's down here. So everybody has excess inventory here. Blue had a little bit of not even mentionable Harley problem, and red did really well. But this time there was some inventory building with 2 and some good selling, dumping inventory by yellow in family. You wait till you see image. Eco is always really tough to figure out. Red is our superstar, 0 in terms of balancing inventory and supply and demand. And blue is not doing bad. It's fairly consistent. They're closer to the 0 line, but red is even flatter. If you could bring the whole thing down next time a little closer to the 0. But blue has obviously figured eco out. Um, Whereas again, yellow is building a huge amount of inventory, sold some off, but this was just a killer, not as bad as a killer's image. Now, drum roll, please. Here's image. This is what you knew was going to happen. We have so much inventory built up here because of this high price. Uh, the other 2 teams are doing great in image. You know, they're especially look at blue and that 0 line. They have really nailed supply and demand with image. So that is about what I wanted to show you. There's other ones that we'll be posting throughout the next couple final weeks. Teardrop. It's been a great universe. Platinum is fantastic. Will live on in history. You've done fantastic. And blue, especially having positive ROCE or ROCE at the very first decision is absolutely unheard of. So uh, or keep doing what you're doing, minor adjustments, take care of your inventory, make sure you've got the production right, fix what you've broken in terms of image. You know, yellow, get your price down. Red, be careful of number of models. And then look carefully at all the sliders and what the market is wanting, but be careful of that gas price index in terms, it doesn't mean add a whole bunch of gas efficiency to image. That's not going to help. You've just got to be careful of what you are producing and what you're able to sell. And if you have to drop down a little bit on your expectations, it doesn't mean you have to overspend a huge amount in marketing that you don't think you're going to sell. So, all in all, the market will see a little lower with that gas price and a little higher in eco and low cost. So that's what happens towards the end here, which we said at the very beginning. It's a portfolio, and low cost and eco destroy you in the beginning, and they help you out as family and image decrease a little in their derived demand and their organic natural demand. So where are we? Let's stop sharing. And thank you again for a wonderful universe. And I hope you had a lot of fun and I hope you're enjoying it. And don't forget, this is your last decision where there's a lot of cool tricks you can play to jump your place or lose your place if you're not careful with inventory for the fifth decision, where we're not producing anymore. It's our last decision. So for good luck on 4. You'll do great. And we'll see you in Halo and on text and in messages. And call me.